Someone afterwards walks in and cuts it with a milchik knife and mixes it into a salad. What's the status of the onion? So we have a problem here. There's a problem here. So now I do some little bit of research and I find out that the knife was not used for 24 hours. But we have a rule that if it's a davar harif, if it's a sharp item, even if the knife was not used for 24 hours, nevertheless some flavor is absorbed into the onion. Aha! So I do have a problem here. However, there are those who say among the Rishonim that if you are down 24 hours, it works for the knife. In addition, there's a minority opinion that onions are not considered the davar harif, only something called the kurchel chiltit. So therefore, if I combine a few leniencies, I can be fine. Another perfect example. Ramosha Feinstein was asked, a couple inherits an old, expensive set of porcelain. Okay, it was used for many. It is a very common question. It was used by the Alte Bobbe 37 years ago, but we are not sure if they use it for milchids, for fleischids. We don't know what standards they followed right at that time. So what's the status? I want to use it today. The general rule is that you cannot kosher earthenware. You cannot kosher porcelain. But here, perhaps there's a leniency. So Rav Moshe says, let me combine a few things together. Number one, there's a Chacham Tzvi that says that if you didn't use it for 12 months, so the non-kosher is no longer there. In addition, you don't use it on the fire itself. It's considered a Kli Shani. In addition, there are those that say that porcelain there's no absorption in it. So he combines all three, and he says, through the system of tziruf, I can allow you to go ahead and use those dishes. So this is a concept. Now, the concept of tziruf came into the issue, a hot issue, in the early days of the 20th century that related to canned fish, canned sardines, canned tuna. Why would there be a question on canned tuna? What shaila would there be on canned tuna? So the shaila specifically had to do with bishul akum, meaning the rabbis made a decree that food that is honorable food, food that would be served at a state dinner, if it is cooked by a non-Jew, due to the fact that the rabbis wanted to avoid intermarriage, they made this decree not to eat it. Fish, tuna, not the ones that come out of the can. But tuna itself is quite an honorable dish. If you go ahead and walk to the fish department in Sobeys and ask them for a tuna steak, right, you're going to walk out with a lot less money on your credit card. It's an expensive item. So tuna is an honorable food. So the question is there a rabbinic prohibition of eating tuna fish that was in essence cooked in a non-Jewish facility? Issue. So Ramosha Feinstein and Rabbaran Kotler and the Sri Dayesh, all the poskim say it is fine. Why? They use the system of tziruf. What's the tziruf? So number one, Ramosha was of the opinion that the prohibition of food cooked by a non-Jew specifically relates to a non-Jew that you know, or they use the type of equipment of people you know. Meaning, what is the idea? Let's analyze the prohibition of bishul akum. It's a prohibition because I might develop a close relationship with my neighbor that cooks for me. So if I become very close to him and he has a daughter, it might lead to intermarriage. So that relates specifically if I know the person. If it's produced in a facility 2,500 miles away, the prohibition does not apply. Now, when the rabbis make their decrees, they are blanket decrees. So therefore, the decree does apply to the person who lives 2,500 miles away. However, if the type of equipment that's used in the facility cannot be used in a traditional kitchen, the decree does not apply. So therefore, Moshe Feinstein believes that in factories, there is no bishul akum. So that's one leniency. Plus, they are mitzaref, they use it tziruf, another weaker heter. Meaning, what is tziruf? Combining many weak heterim, one Magen David, some of them are half Magen Davids, they combine them together and they make a 4 Magen David. That is what is achieved. So another thing that's mentioned there is as follows. The Talmud shares with us that there were specific types of fruits that were not edible raw. The way they would finalize the product was through some kind of smoke. It's possible that it was a cold smoke, me'ushan. So the Talmud shares with us, and this is mentioned in Shulchan Aruch, that on food that is me'ushan, smoke cooked, There is no prohibition of bishul akum because it has to be, the rabbis only made a decree to bishul, cooking that originates with esh. This is a statement in Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, there were those. Now, number one, as a result of that statement, microwaved food, the decree, does not apply. The rabbinic decree of not eating food cooked by a non-Jew does not apply to a microwave. If you visit a Dunkin' Donut, not that it's such an exciting place, they market it well, but if you visit there, you think to yourself, what is this? It's basically fast food. But, lahalocha lamaisa, many Dunkin' Donuts in the United States have hashgacha, like Chicago, like Detroit, and some areas in Jersey. You could get yourself this exciting food, which is a microwaved egg, right? Everyone seems very excited here to have on their bagel a microwaved egg. The microwave egg was microwaved by a person in the kitchen, and there was no mashgiach there. It is considered kosher, even though eggs are cooked, and eggs are honorable foods which could be served in some state in a state dinner. Nevertheless, they are permissible because the bishul, the cooking achieved by a microwave, is not bishul of esh. Then there is a debate. What about if it's steam cooked? Why is there a debate about something that is cooked through a steamer? Because steam does originate with esh, but it is the steam that travels that cooks the actual food. Do you consider it a bishul esh, cooked by fire, or not? So there's a debate, and Ramosha, Rabarin, and others, great dolim, say that the tuna that is cooked in a facility is done through steam. Steam, to be lenient, is a weak leniency. It's one Magen David. We usually don't follow one Magen David standard, but with the concept of siruf, what do we have? The okay, it is fine to go ahead and eat your tuna. So this is an important piece of information when it comes to this, the halachas, and we deal with siruf. So now let's go ahead and visit a few other areas of kashrut. Number one, be suspicious. And let me share with you something that occurred about 1 week ago. Something I learned exactly a week ago. Some people I know were visiting Hawaii. Visiting Hawaii. You know, it's an in place to go. Anywhere than, you know, the cult here, and Baruch Hashem it's cold as well. So they went to Hawaii. And they wanted to know about kosher food, so they contacted some caterer, and he said, yeah, I'm kosher. And he emails them his flyer. So he emails them the flyer, they forward it to me, I open the PDF, and something didn't look right. Number one, the Hebrew that he had on top was actually written from left to right. Meaning, the guy, you know, working there, he could have asked his mashgiach for some help. I hope the mashgiach knows Hebrew. But obviously, the fellow who wrote kosher catering, he wrote nishkan koranki, you know, in other words, he spelled it backwards. So that already looked choshu. He wrote it backwards. In the flyer that he's trying to market is kosher food. And then I look on the bottom, and it had not one but two hashgachas, which, you know, in Israel it's the norm, because the people have 8 hashgachas, which make me a little bit nervous. I prefer one, to be honest with you. I prefer one hashgacha. When I see a letter that's signed by 12 rabbis, I get nervous as well, because 11 of them relied on one, and every single one is one of the 11, if you know what I mean. So therefore, when I prefer seeing one rabbi signing on something, that's my personal thing. When I see two hashgachas, one of them was the KSA, which is a nice hashgacha, and the other one was a well-respected hashgacha as well. It looked chashud, and in this day and age, it takes you seconds to find the phone number, and I felt if it comes to my attention, it's my responsibility. I contact the KSA, I contact the OK, they never heard of the place. What they did was basically something that my kids know how to do, it's called cut and paste, meaning you go to a website, you see the picture of the OK, cut, and you paste it in a flyer, you put it in a flyer, put it in a PDF, send it out, and most people see it, they don't think twice. And the OK thanked me, and they said, we are on it. This is fraud, and they are on the case. So number one, just be alert. In other words, it's so easy nowadays to pull shtick. Be careful. That's a piece of information, number one. Number two, and this is something that is relevant at home, and it's relevant on travel as well. You know, people talk about some kind of shift that occurred over the past 25 years with the standard of kashrut. You know, and there's something that has been addressed by many. There is one area that satisfies me a lot when there's a high standard. In other words, I don't have a problem with the 3 Magen David facility. I have no problem. But I want it to be an honest 3 Magen David facility. And what do I mean by that? There was a kosher agency, a well-respected kosher agency, that gave hashgacha to an affair. The affair was at this country club, and it was a large country club that had several rooms. So in one room, there was a kosher lemahadrin. Every vegetable was checked without a doubt. Every fire was turned on by the mashgiach. That was in room A. In room B, there was another affair out of another kitchen, an affair that was not kosher at all. So far, so good. Now, as you know, even goyim eat hors d'oeuvres, believe it or not. And as a result, a fair that was taking place in room B had people walking around with hors d'oeuvres. And a few of the people were offering the hors d'oeuvres in the room said, you know what, Zrizi Magdimim Lamitzos, let me offer the hors d'oeuvres to the people, not just in the room, but even as they are walking into the building. So they stand by the front door of this country club, and they are standing there, hors d'oeuvres, and as you can imagine, it is natural for people of our tribe to see an hors d'oeuvre and grab it and eat it. And the problem is that when they get into the kosher room, and they turn to someone else and they say, boy, I never tasted that kind of stuff. And they say, there's a good reason why you never tasted such stuff, because shrimp is not kosher. Okay? So this is what happened. Now, why am I sharing it with you? Understand very well that if an agency says we keep we hire an extra mashgiach just for such things, I'm very satisfied with it. Because you have to use common sense. My father used to tell me about his father, that his standards in Uruguay were very high of his kashrut. Why? He had an understanding of how dishonest people work. And therefore, he demanded, in other words, he would walk into a facility, and if he would go ahead and, after looking around, determine that we need 7 mashgichim, that would be the fact. He would not budge. It doesn't mean that he couldn't figure out leniencies and halacha on questions, but he understood the reality. Agencies have to understand their reality. So this is what I call how to avoid, and it's something you'll be aware of when you travel. It's something you have to be aware of, unfortunately, at home as well, to avoid the treif lemahadrin, because it was lemahadrin, that affair. The problem was it was a treif. Now, another area where I believe, I'll share with you another 2-3 Magen David standard. When you buy canned vegetables, not everything is fresh. 15 years ago, I think I'm not the only one who would eat a canned vegetable, from corn to carrots, that did not have hashgacha. About 10, 15 years ago, the kosher agencies said we should only buy vegetables, canned vegetables with hashgacha. For the following reason: they go through steamers, the steam circulates, it returns to some kind of well, so they could be steaming first some actual meat, and then the steam which came in contact with the meat returns to its well, and when afterwards they steam the vegetables, it will perhaps have a little bit of a transfer of flavor. This is what kosher agencies recommend. Now, without getting into the halachic details, that is a good thing. It is, without doubt, a nice 5 Magen David level. If you are traveling, and it's a situation where you cannot get a hold of vegetables, when it comes to beans, the guidelines are different. But when it comes to the carrots, the corn, it is a leniency that you could take into consideration in travel, due to many halachic considerations. I'm often asked, is there a list of items that do not need hashgacha? Is there such a list? So number one, you have to remember that times change. Meaning, I was doing some research on the coffee topic. We're going to hear 2 weeks from now. So it does mention in passing of additives that are added to coffee, to sugar. There was a time that they actually added blood to refine sugar. Now, I'm not telling you to start panicking at home and looking at your sugar. And there was about 10 years ago a little bit of a concern that they're adding some gelatin to sugar. It's of course going to make it much more expensive. You don't have to worry about it. So before I tell you, yes, there is such a list, you have to know that if you hear a list today, or if you hear specific items today, it doesn't mean that in 3 years from now the industry and the realities could change. A perfect example is that facilities, this is in Western New York, there are a lot of facilities that package milk. So they would package milk. The farmers would bring in milk 4 a.m. They would package them through the morning. So 25 years ago, the equipment would remain idle from about 1 p.m. until the next morning. Then they realized it's not kidai, so what are they going to package there? Orange juice. So Upstate Milk in Buffalo, New York, they produce orange juice and milk. But the orange juice has a little bit of went on milchik equipment. Not too much of a concern for whatever halach reason, not barnat, but if a person who has a tradition of only drinking the chalav Yisrael, only drinking the chalav Yisrael of an actual person seeing the process, that could create a problem for them. Meaning times change, and it's something to be indeed aware of. Years ago, I actually put together a list, and if you ever have specific ingredients, I mean flour and sugar's on the list, but I'll just share with you the list of items that, I'm sure this is very helpful, right? Of items that dextrose, right, or dill oil does not need. Why do I have such a list? I used to be in the industry of kashrus, and I used to walk into facilities and go and do and it became necessary for me to know what does require, what does not require. So people in the larger agencies, like the OU, were extremely helpful. They have a database with thousands upon thousands of ingredients that they call the Group A or Group 1. And therefore, anything that fits into Group 1 is basically in its natural state, and it has no issue like lemon oil, for example. So that's something that does exist. Why am I sharing this with you? If it ever becomes relevant of a specific ingredient, feel free to email or call me. I could do the research. I could look up. Perhaps my list from 12 years ago changed, but I'd be more than happy to help anyone if there's indeed a question that is asked. Okay. I don't know if I could really sum up, but what we do have is an understanding of there are standards that we keep. Know the realities that exist. Know that there are leniencies as well. One thing you have to remember is that you visit Eretz Yisrael, things are different due to the fact that there is Trumot U'Ma'asrot. And there are, in the marketplace here in North America as well, we are blessed that we can get Israeli produce. Do not avoid it. Rather, take it. And if you are concerned about Trumas and Ma'asros, email me. There's an easy system to fix it. And it's chaval not to support the Israeli economy due to some kind of concern. It is easy to go ahead and purchase Israeli produce and to tithe it. There are a few areas where you have to concern yourself with orla, but it's limited. In general, you could go ahead and fix and do the mitzvah of supporting the Israeli economy. When we talk about the star issues and or the Magen David issues, there are a few things, but we'll leave them out for now. And that's basically, maybe I'll take a question or two. Yes?
Milk in Costa Rica?
Milk in Costa Rica. Good question. Research would have to be done, and you would have to turn to someone local that knows the reality. Again, as you realize, when I talked about Latin America or Central America, I'm a little bit more suspicious. Costa Rica is not Mexico, but even in Chile, which we considered it to be the Switzerland of South America, nevertheless we were more cautious. Ask those who are there. Without doubt, did their research, or it's something that if you do want, I could do the research for it in case of need. Yes?
Frozen vegetables.
Okay. Frozen vegetables. That is a very, very good question that relates to much more than traveling. We have to remember the following. The issue of bugs in vegetables is a very fascinating issue because actually bugs have been around for many, many years. They were not created 15 years ago. Bugs in food have been addressed for many, many centuries. And, there's a lot of fascinating stories of a letter that rabbis wanted to put out in the early 80s to make everyone aware of the serious concern of bugs. And they turned to Rav Moshe to sign that letter, and he wouldn't sign it due to the fact that there are leniencies. So therefore, in other words, when it comes to frozen vegetables, if you are traveling, or if you live in a small community like Memphis, Tennessee, and you cannot get the bodek or whatever high standard items you find here in Toronto, it is permissible to purchase grade A frozen vegetables, even if it includes broccoli and cauliflower. Reason being, it's grade A. Number two, bugs in the deep freeze don't do very well. And what happens is that they disintegrate. And even if they do not disintegrate totally, but even if they have a 2-for-1 split, even if they break apart, they are suddenly nullified. So this is a leniency that is not a 5 Magen David. The 5 Magen David level is, at least I hope that the Bodek is on, is the Bodek product. But it's a 3 Magen David level that for a traveler, the frozen would be fine. If you use fresh, that is already a different discussion and a different topic of how you check it. But yes, you should look at it. I like looking at my food in general as well. So it's an excellent question and a leniency that could be relevant.
Could the Rav go through a procedure for double wrapping fish when traveling?
Okay. You're traveling. So number one, we know that for fish to be identified as kosher, you have to see the scales. However, modern day poskim say that if you know for a fact, and there is a siman that is from a kosher species, the Shulchan Aruch talks about the fact that they cut fish into 3 pieces, and 3 pieces fit like a puzzle. 2 of them have no scales, but 1 of them does, but you can put them together as a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, so the 2 that don't have a siman are kosher because you know that they are part of the bigger fish. So too, you could go ahead and rely on the redness of salmon. So salmon can be purchased even if it is skinned already. You have to be concerned if it's purchased in a supermarket and you are, again, it's for a traveler. You have to do something called greira where you scrape the surface. Perhaps they cut, before cutting your salmon, they cut some octopus and you don't want octopus residue on your salmon. After you do greira and the non-Jew goes ahead and cooks it for you, it is done in a microwave. And we have the rule that if you double wrap something, even if there's some residue in the air or on the surface, there's no transfer through the double wrap. Now, as everyone knows with microwave, sometimes it pops the steam, so you would have to work around how to get that through. But yes, you double wrap something in a microwave and it's cooked. I don't know how it tastes. It's something that others can tell me. It's good. It's good. So you have no issue of bishul akum and you have no issue of the fish.
Isn't there a question with the tuna that there's different kinds of tuna and some tuna is not even kosher? So that's not the cooking issue, but just stam tuna has to have a hechsher because of that.
Correct. Tuna itself there are many varieties, and some of them are indeed not kosher. The ones in a can always come from a kosher species, and therefore before there were OUs and OKs on the can itself, like 60, 50 years ago, in Lakewood, New Jersey, Rabban Cutler allowed them to use bumblebee. So if you want to follow a Lakewood tradition and you have in front of you Starkist and bumblebee, perhaps you should indeed purchase a bumblebee. But nevertheless, the significance of knowing is that you don't walk into a restaurant and say, give me, of course, you wouldn't do it anyway, but the idea is that you cannot walk into a store and say, give me a tuna steak, because a tuna steak, what's St. Lawrence Market downtown? Right?
St. Lawrence.
St. Lawrence Market, you walk in there, don't ask them for a tuna steak. If you don't have the siman, if it does not have the scales, you have to concern yourself that it's from a species that's not kosher. Now, when it comes to tuna cans, we are blessed to live in a country or in a region where we could find kosher symbols, and therefore we buy a 4 Magen David, OU Starkist, bumblebee, and you should enjoy it, but don't eat too much. The mercury is not so good for us. Yes?
What about bishul akum for a vegetable like potato?
Okay. Potato is a very fascinating topic because it depends how it is made. I eat sometimes, I'm trying to avoid it, potato chips. Potato chips are cooked in essence. It's not cooked in Lay's and J's. There's no Jew turning on the fire. But potato chips will not be served at a state dinner, so therefore there's no bishul akum with the potato. However, when it comes to actual potato, there's interesting, you study the poskim from different eras. There were eras the poskim say potatoes, that's not an honorable food. It's the poor people that eat potatoes. But you have to assess in every generation, and the Star Cake contacted the White House chef and asked him at a royal dinner, at a state dinner in the White House, would you serve a potato? And the answer was yes. So therefore, when it comes to a potato, if it is cooked in a traditional way, there would be a problem. If it's microwaved, and again, I don't know what the results are going to be, but kosher it will be if it's microwaved, because there could be a problem of the traditional potato. Okay, Pesach, thank you everyone.
Well, we thank Rabbi Wolofsky for an outstanding lecture tonight. Stay tuned for next week. First of all, let me again thank David and Fran Wolf, who are sponsoring this on the in memory of Fran's parents, Max Good and Regina Good. Next week, it's Shabbos on the Road. It's going to be sponsored by Zev and Susan Shanehouse in memory of Susan, Father Yaakov, and Svia Victor Schwebel. For those that came late at 2 minutes after 8, we had started already. We're not following Jewish Standard Time. We're starting at 8 o'clock next week. Come early, get a seat. If you can come, and there will be coffee again, fresh fruit. Help yourself, but please come on time. And thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.
Pesach, how many Magadim?
The cups are great. We will daven Maariv.